Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we talk about the big AI race, our minds usually jump to a few major players out in the West, right? Well, today, we're going to look at a different story. It's about why India is basically saying thanks, but no thanks to that one-size-fits-all model, and carving out its very own path in artificial intelligence.
And that really gets you thinking, doesn't it? I mean, is the AI you interact with every single day, is it actually built for you? You know, for your language, your culture, your specific way of seeing the world.
Well, India is betting that the answer to that question is a hard no. And they're not just talking about it, they're putting a massive effort into building their own native large language models, or LLMs, right from scratch. These are going to be designed specifically for their people. So let's get into exactly why they're doing this.
All right, so the first and probably the biggest piece of this puzzle is something you could call the language labyrinth. Seriously, to even think about building an AI for India, you have to wrap your head around a linguistic landscape that is just, well, it's unlike anywhere else on the planet. I mean, the scale here is just staggering. We're not talking about a handful of languages. We're talking about almost 20,000 different dialects spoken across the country. Think about that for a second. How on earth do you build one AI that can understand a farmer in Punjab, a tech coder in Bengaluru, and a fisherman down in Kerala? It's a huge challenge.
Okay, so you might think, well, let's just focus on the 22 official languages. But even then, you run smack into a huge problem. See, AI models, they learn by eating up billions and billions of words from the internet. But for a lot of these Indian languages, that data just isn't there in the right amounts. The web has been dominated by English for so long, so the digital footprint is tiny in comparison.
And it's not just about the amount of data. It's a deep technical issue too. It's this thing called tokenization. Basically, AIs chop up sentences into little pieces called tokens. But for a lot of Indian languages, which have totally different structures than English, this whole process is super inefficient. It takes way more tokens, which means way more computer power and, yep, way more money, just to understand a single sentence. And that economic reality, well, that brings us right to the next big hurdle.
Right, so that inefficiency we were just talking about, it collides head-on with cold, hard cash. Because when it comes to funding this global AI race, let's be real. India is playing a totally different game compared to giants like the US and China.
Just look at the national spending on R&D. As a percentage of their entire economy, India's investment is just a tiny fraction of what the US and China are pouring in. That creates a massive resource gap right out of the gate.
And if you think that's a big gap, wait till you see the private funding for startups. It's not a gap, it's a canyon. We're talking almost $100 billion for US AI startups this year, compared to less than $1 billion for India's. So you see, you just can't win by trying to throw more money at the problem. It forces you to get creative, to embrace what some people call frugal innovation.
There's also a cultural angle here. For decades, India's amazing tech industry has been world-class at providing IT services, helping global companies set up and run their tech. But that's a completely different muscle than building a foundational AI product from the ground floor. It's a whole different ballgame, and it needs a totally new way of thinking.
So, okay, you've got these massive language challenges and some serious economic limitations. You'd think maybe they'd scale back their ambitions, right? Nope, not at all. What's actually happening is the exact opposite. India is firing back with a huge, coordinated national effort.
The strategy is smart. They know they can't outspend their rivals. That's just not on the table. So they have to outthink them. Key figures in India's AI world are actually looking at what developers like China's DeepSeek did. They proved you can build a top-tier model for just a fraction of the cost of the big Western ones. So for India, efficiency isn't just a goal, it's the entire game plan.
And make no mistake, the Indian government is putting its money where its mouth is. They've set aside over $1 billion for this new IndiaAI mission. That's a huge statement, a clear signal that this is a top national priority.
And this isn't just some vague promise. There's a really clear three-step plan in motion. First, they called for proposals to build these core models. Second, they locked down the most critical resource in AI today, thousands of powerful GPUs for the researchers. And now, they're actively sponsoring a whole range of different AI models to bring them to life. So instead of putting all their eggs in one basket, they're smart. They're funding a whole portfolio of projects. You've got everything from these massive, super powerful multilingual models to smaller, more focused ones. But notice the common theme here: voice. Voice capabilities are everywhere. And that's absolutely crucial in a country with hundreds of millions of people where talking is the main way to communicate and where literacy can sometimes be a real barrier to using text-only tech.
And this big national push, it's already starting to pay off. Take a model called Bharat GPT, for instance. It's a fantastic example. It's the first government-funded model that can handle both text and voice, and it already supports 12 different Indian languages. And to prove that point about efficiency, they've already rolled out a smaller, mini version.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how. We see the challenges and the plan. But let's pull back for a second and ask the really big question: why? Why does all this push for a local AI with its own unique character, why does it matter so much?
Really, it all boils down to a simple, fundamental truth for our time. One size does not fit all. AI can't just be this single monolithic thing. For these tools to actually be useful and for people to trust and use them, they have to get the local values, the languages, the culture. I mean, an AI built and trained for Silicon Valley just isn't going to understand the nuances of life in Kolkata. It's as simple as that.
You know, what's happening in India isn't just a story about India. It's kind of a blueprint for other countries. And honestly, it's a wake-up call for the entire tech world. It shows us that even though AI has to have a local feel, the project of getting it right is a global one. And that leaves all of us with a huge question for the decade ahead. How do we work together to build an AI future that isn't just incredibly powerful, but also incredibly diverse?